With so many tent options on the market, it's hard to know if you're making the right purchase. For me, I unfortunately chose wrong. Allow me to explain. So about a year ago, I was on the hunt for my first rooftop tent. I had two requirements. It had to have an outer aluminum shell, because we always find ourselves going down very overgrown trails with a lot of branches, and I didn't want a soft canvas cover to get ripped open, and it had to be within my price point. Now, I was originally hoping to find a wedge style tent. That was what I wanted, and I came across this Roofnest, Condor Overland, and I decided to settle on this tent. I found it in the marketplace for a pretty good deal. And after it being my home away from home for almost a year now, I've found all of its flaws, and they're pretty major flaws if you plan on off-roading all year round in all seasons. It's advertised as a 4-season tent, and it's not quite meeting those standards in my opinion, and I'll explain. All right, so most of this video is going to be shot in FPV, just so you can really get a immersive experience of how it is to be with this tent. And you can really see from my perspective the flaws in it, rather than you being away from the tent looking at me opening it. All right, so before I get too deep into giving you all the negatives, there are a couple positives with the tent. The shell is extremely durable. I actually put a dent on top of it right here, backed underneath of a tree and didn't see it, and it never actually tore the seam open. It stayed nice and tight. I have torn a badge off the side of it. Other than that, the outside has stayed very solid. Other than a seal up on the front here, got tore open by a branch. But other than that, it's held up to the abuse so far. But for me to really show you some of the flaws in this tent, I got to get it cracked open. So there's normally a key. You can just get your fingers over the top to unlatch it. All right, so opening the tent up, the first thing you're gonna see is that the floor that extends out folds into the tent, and your ladder also goes inside of the tent. So if you have a lot of mud and debris on your ladder, you're gonna be putting that inside of your tent. You do have the option to unlatch it, then you're putting it in the Jeep, which is like most tents in the market anyways. It's just one thing to consider. You might be putting a muddy ladder in here. Now I do have both storage bags hanging off the front of the tent for your shoes. Now, pulling the tent open, this is where one of the major flaws comes into play for me with this style of tent, is your floor is actually supported by your ladder. So you need to find the perfect height and lock it in the perfect spot, or else you're actually pulling down on the tent itself and putting too much pressure on it. So you have to play around with your ladder and get it set just right where it locks in the perfect spot so that when you step on it, it doesn't sag. And as you can see, even right now, it's playing games with me to try and get it right. It can take a good amount of fidgeting around. Right there, I got it. So it's a kind of a game of just playing with the ladder until you can crawl up there. So if you're stuck in the rain, you're stuck playing with the ladder until you get it right. And speaking of rain, that's where this tent does not shine. This tent is great if you live in a dry climate, or if you plan on using it for only some sections of the year. As soon as you get into the rainy season, you take it out in some pretty bad weather, you're gonna have a bad time. And the main reason for that is there's a bar inside of the tent that pulls the rain fly tight, and on top of the tent, it doesn't pull it tight enough, and water pools there. And water also likes to pool on this entrance. I'll get the bars out, I'll pull the tent tight, and you can see what I'm talking about. Now, for the sake of this video, I'm just going to put the front on. I won't put the two sidebars in. Those pull nice and tight, actually. Those ones actually work well. It's just the front that's a bit of a problem. Now, with this pulled out, you can visually see a problem here. This is just kind of flopping around, and so when it rains, this whole fly pools up and it starts to fill with water right here at the entrance. So if you're getting out in the morning or you're getting into your tent in the evening and you forget about that, when you go up the ladder and bump your head, you get water all down your back and you're either waking up wet or you're going to bed wet, which is not ideal at all. Now, if we climb up inside of the tent, this was the main selling point for me, is the amount of room in this tent. You have a nice skylight, and on the back wall, you have a nice organization panel to put your phone, clothes, whatever you want to put in that wall. It works well, and having the skylight here is nice if you want to wake up to the sun in the morning and not know it's daylight. And you also have this nice LED light in here where you can plug in a power bank, get it lit up. But this is where the second problem with the rain happens, is this fly is not pulled tight enough by this bar that folds out with the floor, because this folds down and the floor goes on top of it. So with that being said, when it rains heavy, it likes to pool right here and then seep through the main portion of your tent and then drip onto your bedding. So when we're at camp and everyone else is enjoying their life, they're not worrying about it because they all have just a wedge tent where the top is aluminum, I have to crawl up here every half hour or so if it's raining hard and push up on this to then push the water out off of the tent. Or else I crawl up here at the end of the night, my sleeping bag's wet, and I'm kind of trying to dry my bedding out before I go to sleep, which is not ideal, and a tent that MSRP's for almost $5,000. And another thing I don't like is that once it's popped open, this entire tent turns into just your regular conventional tent, in a sense, in which you're relying on just a rain fly and tent material to keep you dry and out of the elements. So when you go to fold it up and put it away, all of that tenting material is wet. So drying it out takes much longer than if you just have a wedge tent with an aluminum top, because then all the water just beads off and all you have to worry about drying is the walls if it was a windy night. But generally the tent's going to have a lot more moisture in this configuration than if it was just a wedge tent. All right, scenario. It just poured rain all night. You got all your stuff taken out of the tent and you got to pack it up. Well, now you have all this canvas that is absolutely drenched and you got to put it all away. This is where some of my biggest problems with the tent come from with packing it up. So you got to close the floor, which is all fine and dandy. Now you got to collapse this ladder down, tucking her in over your head. Climb up here. Now, as you can see, your mattress is completely exposed here. I'm gonna pull this tight. Remember, it's raining. All of this is soaked. You're gonna go to pull down on the strap, and all of these rails here that can take keys are full of water because of the angle it's sitting on. So as you pull it down, it all beads out and runs off the tent and drips onto your mattress and gets underneath your mattress. So there's water getting on your mattresses for no reason. And then you've also taken all of the tent material that's tucked in behind the floor now, and you're pushing that into your mattress. And so this just turns into a giant wet mess. And then when you go to open it up the next night, after you wheel to wherever you're going, everything is soaked. I went out in an atmospheric river the other weekend, and this was drenched. It took me days to dry it out. And when I got to camp that night, actually, it was sopping wet. But get all of the tent material packed away in here. And get it all nice and shut. Now packing it up, whether you're opening it or putting it away, is generally pretty fast. That is one pro about this tent. It's easy to set up, it's easy to put away. It's just massive design flaws, and they could have made the fly get tight any other way, but they relied on a bar that folds out with the floor, and that just was not enough for this rain fly. So I will be switching tents in the future. If you plan on camping all year round, I do not recommend this model of Roofnest. This is the Condor Overland, and it is not good in the rain whatsoever. If you live somewhere dry, you only plan on going out in the summer or in fair weather, this tent would be wonderful. It really would be. There's lots of space, It is one of the main reasons I bought it is for the room. So my plan is to eventually sell off this tent and switch to a wedge style tent where you have an aluminum top letting water run off, and you're not relying on a conventional style tent fabric and fly to keep you out of the weather like this one is. The aluminum shell is simply on this tent to just transport it and keep it safe when you're on tight trails. But other than that, it is all just it's a hybrid tent. Put it that way. Now I say all of this about this tent because even used, I paid about $3,500 for this tent. And you can get an old Smitty built tent that is a full soft tent with a soft shell cover for about $1,200 on Marketplace. I bought this off Marketplace as well. And this essentially is the same as having a Smitty built tent. It's all fabric, it's all exposed. It takes longer to dry it out. You're not as protected from the elements, not as protected from snow, which I'm going to be out doing soon as the season changes. And so you're paying more for about the same, in my opinion, other than having the aluminum shell. So really, the benefit of this is the aluminum shell. And other than that, I can't really see a benefit to it. So if you're going to spend the money to get a hard shell tent, I recommend buying either a straight pop-up or a wedge tent. This in-between style, I'm not sold on. So I will be on the search for a new tent. Anyways, I'll see you in the next video. Remember to take the time to get a little lost.